Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese, and I'm flying solo today, but I have with me our special guest, David Atwell from Real World Theology. David and I will be talking about Real World Theology's annual Star Trek tribute, Trektember, which is going on right now. It's going to be coming up right after we discuss some Star Trek news and the latest episode of Lower Decks here on episode 3, Talking Trektember. Stick around. All right, well, here we are again. This is episode 3, and sadly, my cohort, my right arm, my first officer, my other brain, and more importantly, my clock watcher, Tim Van Orden, is not here. But I do have David Atwell here with me from Real World Theology.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, David. I'm really excited that you're here. I've known David for a few years, done some writing for him and for Real World Theology, which you can find on the Gospel According to Star Trek website and kevincneese.com, and on Real World Theology, strangely enough.
That's right.
There'll be links to all that down below.
Yeah, actually, I was just looking it up. The first time you wrote for me, the article went up on September 9th of the year 2017, and you were writing about the Best of Both Worlds, part 1 and 2 for Trektember.
And yeah. This is going to be dropping on September 7th, so it's like it's almost our third anniversary.
That's right. Amazing. I feel so special.
That's fantastic. Well, so Star Trek news, we'll get more with David in just a little bit. We're going to learn all about what he does, and until then, he's going to be this wonderful disembodied voice for you to listen to along with mine. As we talk about Star Trek news, there are, every week I kind of wonder, is there going to be enough Star Trek news to do a Star Trek news segment? And this week is another one of those weeks where I'm like, can we cover everything that I found in this one segment? The first thing that I was going to talk about was Star Trek Discovery, which, of course, we're doing our exploration of right now on the podcast. We just started last episode. Star Trek Discovery Season 1 is going to air on actual CBS.
Yeah. The first time we've had any Star Trek, or any new Star Trek, rather, on the air since Enterprise went off the air, right?
No, because Star Trek Discovery actually premiered on the air.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. We were talking about that last episode, my excitement at enjoying watching a Star Trek premiere for the first time. So I'm really interested to see how this works. I notice, well, it says at 10 p.m., but I'm not sure what, it's probably Pacific time based on where the article takes. Oh, let's see. 10 to 11 p.m. Eastern Pacific. So I'm guessing, I don't know how they're going to do it because Star Trek Discovery is TVMA.
Right. I mean, the first few episodes are probably going to be fine to air as is. I don't remember anything really questionable until later on in the season. But yeah, it seems like one of those things where they could probably edit it down.
They probably can. And, of course, the main thing I think in those first couple of episodes is the violence.
Right. That's true.
I was talking last time about the puddles of people. And I don't know how much of that you can. Of course, they show all kinds of stuff on primetime television now in terms of violence and gore. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's going to be great to have Star Trek on TV again, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And this is going to be season 1, right?
Just season 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a lead in to season 3 because we're, one of the impetuses for beginning this podcast was that we have this 23 weeks of Star Trek on CBS All Access. And so on October 15th, season 3 is going to launch of Star Trek Discovery. And we thought that'd be a good time to start doing this. And so it's really to try to, I think, get eyeballs on season 3.
And it is such a different world right now with regarding to Star Trek. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
I mean, just even just 4 years ago, it was so different.
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking just the other day that in 3 years, we have gotten, if you count short treks, we've gotten 4 new Star Treks in 3 years.
And if you look at all of the new Star Trek that comes out in the calendar year 2020, none of it takes place before Voyager. So you've got, season 1 of Picard, which takes place a couple years, I think maybe a couple of decades after Voyager.
Right.
And then you've got Lower Decks season 1, which takes place a couple years after Voyager. And then you've got season 3 of Discovery, which takes place a couple centuries after Voyager. I think that's really interesting. After all of these years of us Star Trek fans complaining about how everything's a prequel, they're finally saying, okay, well, no prequels anymore at all.
Fine, we're taking your prequels away. So there,
Right.
see how you like it.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm excited. I'm always excited. I don't care. I'm as interested, honestly, about Star Trek stories that take place in Star Trek's past as I
Yep.
am about stories that take place in Star Trek's future.
I agree.
Which is another thing that I want to mention. That leads us to our next point. You talk about all this Star Trek taking place in the future. There is some exciting Star Trek that is happening. We're coming up on Star Trek Day,
Mm-hmm.
on the 8th, which is the day after this episode will drop. And on that day will be released a fan film called Star Trek First Frontier.
Interesting.
And this is a film that excites me personally because it's about Robert and Sarah April.
Interesting.
And yeah, so it's early days of Enterprise, and of course, I mean, none of it's going to be connected with with canon the way we might like, but
Right. Sure.
it's been in the making for a number of years, and it looks to be like a really good project. And
Huh.
yeah, there's gonna be some watch parties going on, I think, with some friends of mine.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I mean, we've got Strange New Worlds coming up, of course, that sort of promises another, Enterprise before Kirk feel. And I have a feeling that that's going to be, we're talking, if we are talking about April now, we're going to basically have seen everything from the beginning of the Enterprise through its refit, through its destruction. And that's going to be really interesting to be able to follow the entire legacy of that ship that sort of started it all.
Yeah, that's gonna be fantastic. Years ago there was a comic book called Star Trek Early Voyages,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a direct sequel to The Cage. And
Oh,
it
okay.
picked up following the crew of the Enterprise under Pike, imagining some new crew members that we didn't get to see in the episode, and that was pretty exciting. IDW put out a Star Trek Omnibus 2, I think it was. They put out a collection of that series. So that was
Okay,
cool.
I'm gonna have to track that down. That sounds great.
Yeah, it's really cool. Star Trek Early Voyages, very cool stuff. We'll put a link to that in the description, I guess, too. Okay, so Star Trek Day again. This is September 8th, Monday. No, Tuesday, the day after you're listening to this. So that's tomorrow if you're listening to this now. CBS All Access is doing what has been referred by, I think, Alex Kurtzman, has been referred to as the first canon Star Trek Day. I remember in 2016 on the 50th anniversary on Star Trek Day on the September 8th, I was on the radio in the UK. I wasn't in the UK. I was on the radio in the UK.
Okay.
But on Premier Christian Radio, and it's on my website, kevinsenies.com/media. And in that interview, the host asked me, she's like, "So happy Star Trek Day," and she's like, "What are you doing to celebrate Star Trek Day?" And you can hear in the interview, I mean, I can hear that I'm like completely at a loss. I'm like, there's no codified celebration for this. We don't.
Right.
We don't kill the fatted targ and
Right.
roast it with our hand phasers.
I mean, if you could find one,
Find one.
but everyone knows that a targ is best served raw, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. But I mean, come on, we're not all Klingons.
Right. I think it's kind of funny that they're actually celebrating Star Trek Day this year. They didn't celebrate it for the 50th, but apparently the 54th. That's worth celebrating.
That's how it goes with Star. But they didn't celebrate Star Trek Day. That's true. There wasn't an official codified like Star Trek Day. But I mean, there was a lot surrounding the 50th anniversary. There were still a lot of celebrations. You had the History Channel did the 2-part documentary thing, and
Mm-hmm.
you had the new Abrams film came out,
Right,
the
Beyond,
Star Trek
yeah.
Beyond, which was gorgeous.
It was fantastic, yeah.
And also that year was the release of a special 50th anniversary book, which I think is probably the best commemoration of Star Trek's 50th anniversary that was published. I just can't think of the name of it.
I just think it's interesting how much has changed, because like we were talking about before, there's so much more Star Trek this year, but also like Paramount and CBS are back together again, and at the 50th anniversary they weren't, and so there wasn't really any way for them to do a unified celebration.
I like how you just blew past my attempt at a joke there. See, Tim would have gotten that because the book I'm talking about is mine.
See, I was trying to cover for you so that you could look up the name of it. I didn't think about.
See, I played that so well. You just took me literally.
Yep.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Oh boy.
But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, things have changed a lot, and I think people have talked about Star Trek being in chaos and different things. We talked about that in the first episode, that
Yeah.
things feel a little scattered and weird because there's so much stuff happening. But at the same time, I still go back to that this is probably the best time to be a Trekkie, at least since the 25th anniversary. That this is just a great time to be a Trekkie, and like you said, so it's the 54th anniversary when we have the codified Star Trek Day. So what? I mean, I have a T-shirt my parents gave me that has a big 53 on it for the 53rd anniversary of Star Trek. It's got all the cast members on it and everything. And I'm like, I don't have a 50th anniversary shirt, but doggone it, I've got a 53rd anniversary shirt.
Yeah. Well, all numbers are arbitrary anyway, right?
Exactly. So hey, we can do it anytime. It's great. But the check out the 50th the Star Trek Day thing on CBS All Access. They say it's free, so I don't know if you don't have to have a CBS All Access account or what. But go to StarTrek.com/day, again, link in the description, and learn all about it. It's 24 hours of programming. They're going to have curated Star Trek marathons and also panels with cast members from from 9 series. It's really from every series, because there are 10 series counting Strange New Worlds. They have a Strange New Worlds panel.
Oh wow.
And they really have a panel from every single one of those, because Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes are there representing both TNG and Picard. And then George Takei is doing the TOS panel with Rod Roddenberry, and Takei was also on the Star Trek the Animated Series. So that really actually covers everything except the Kelvin timeline. So
yeah.
It's going to be really cool. There's a lot of the shows have most of their casts on there, or a big healthy portion of their casts on their panels. So
yeah.
It's good stuff.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, one last piece of Star Trek news. Are you ready for it?
Go for it.
This one is one that I was sent to me just in the last couple days by at least 3 separate people, if not 4, have come to me with this one, because it's getting a lot of attention right now. And it's an announcement about season 3
of
Discovery. Yeah. And it's this casting announcement. So it's Blu del Barrio and Ian Alexander, who are the first non-binary, respectively, the first non-binary and transgender actors, and actors, I don't know, but characters, transgender non-binary characters in Star Trek history. GLAAD actually did an interview with Blu del Barrio. That's where I learned about this, because that was what was tweeted out, that was sent to me, was the interview with Blu. And they are not a brand new actor, but this is kind of their first big gig.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's cool reading the enthusiasm there. It's all about, getting this first big gig and everything. You can tell you're reading the words of this excited young person who's never done anything like this before,
right?
and is really jazzed about it. What kind of conversations have you seen going on about this?
I've seen him go both ways. I mean, not as much, thankfully, as I was afraid was going to happen, but a lot of backlash from the Christian fans and more conservative fans of Star Trek, and all the other stuff that you just sort of hear whenever this sort of thing comes out. Which, like I said, I'm just glad that there was less of it than I expected there to be.
I want to say that I'm always very aware when I'm writing and speaking in this realm that my audience can be any range of Christians, all the way from not understanding and not believing in and not supporting in any way queer people, or believing that that's sinful and what have you, all the way to actually being a gay, a bi, a transgender, a non-binary person. So I'm definitely never here to take sides, and that's how I try to treat most of the more sensitive theological and doctrinal topics that we might cover. both in the books and in podcasts and blogs and what have you. I do want to say that I think it's I don't know, there's some reaction that I see from certain Star Trek fans who get angry about the inclusion maybe of and we're going to talk more about like Culber and Stamets and things like that as we get into, and Jet Reno as we get into Discovery on the podcast. But a lot of people who seem kind of shocked by it and upset. And
Right.
I just kind of want to say, Star Trek is a progressive show. Like it
Right.
always has been. We can look back at the original series and it seems, I just kind of like, wow, you're kind of, you have a really low view of women, or
Right.
things like that. But in its time,
Yeah.
in its moment in history, it was a very progressive show, and it always has been.
Yeah.
So this is something I've been expecting for a very long time. And it's something that Gene very much wanted in Next Generation.
Right.
That's where you see there are a few shots of the men wearing skirts, in the early seasons of TNG. And he wanted to have gay couples in the background and stuff, and 10 Forward, which is about as much as you could do in 1989
Right.
or whenever he suggested it. But on television, but things have changed, haven't they?
Yeah. And I mean, regardless of what you think about it, regardless of like your convictions theologically and what you believe the Bible says about this sort of thing, these people exist, right? And this is, my wife actually made a point when she heard about this, talking about, if we want to love our neighbor, which the Bible says that we have to do, how can we love our neighbor well if we aren't willing to listen to their story? In order to love them well, we have to know what they're going through. And I think that we forget that a lot of times. I personally have no problem with this casting at all. I think that it's just yet another expression of how Star Trek is and has always reflected our culture that we find ourselves in. And I think that that's in the DNA of this show, basically.
I appreciate you being here and giving your thoughts, because Tim and I are going to talk more on this sort of thing, because we have to when you're talking about Discovery. And I think that's one of the great things about Discovery, including things that make people uncomfortable, whether it's this area or other areas. I talked last week about when Star Trek gets too sexy, or when Star Trek gets too violent, or when Star Trek swears too much. Star Trek fans get upset. And those are all things that we get to talk about in Discovery. And so I actually always welcome any kind of media that makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's what it's supposed to do.
I appreciate that Star Trek continues to both welcome people in, and also in that welcoming make some people uncomfortable. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's get into Lower Decks real quickly, because new Star Trek is happening, and we're talking about Star Trek that hasn't even happened yet. Episode 5 of Lower Decks, Cupid's Errant Arrow.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
I thought it was pretty good. I really liked Moist Vessel, and I really liked Envoys, and I think those are still my two favorite. But I thought this one was pretty good. It had a really, really good Star Trek-y premise, and it explored character a lot more than it was trying to make jokes and stuff. And I feel like that was something that the Orville, when it started doing that, really started to take off as a show for me. Was when it started exploring good sci-fi premises, and going more to the character than trying to just make the cheap joke. And I think that's what this is doing. And honestly, you were talking, I think it was in the last episode, about how this isn't the best new Star Trek show in decades. And I agree with that, by the way. I don't think this is the best new Star Trek show in decades, but I do think this might be the strongest first season for a Star Trek episode or Star Trek series in decades.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that, but that's okay.
Okay. All right.
But that is only because of the severe level to which I hated the first episode, and how much I loved the first seasons of Discovery and Picard.
Well, how about the quickest turnaround between that sort of first season slump and when it actually gets good? That might be more like what I was talking about, because I thought it was a turnaround from like episode 1 to episode 2. From like terrible to great.
Yes.
And I thought, and that's really quick compared to like Next Generation took it almost a season and a half to really get good. And you know, Deep Space Nine is about a season or so, and then there was obviously in both of those series there was good episodes peppered here and there. But I think with Lower Decks, I feel like they really found their footing in episode 2, and I was really just impressed.
It was like getting the whole like first season slump done in one episode, which is you know, like everything else in this series, surprisingly efficient.
Right. Very quick.
Very quick.
Whiplash inducing almost.
But I will also say that I you know, a lot of people say exactly what you're saying, that it took, you know, 2 or 3 seasons or a season and a half or whatever for Deep Space Nine or TNG to really come together. I love early TNG. There are certain episodes and certain moments, you know, code of honor. There are certain, certain episodes and certain moments that don't work, you know, and you can say, well, you know, we're still figuring it out. But there's a lot of that stuff I really love, you know, and for me, Deep Space Nine, just stem to stern, I love that whole series. I have maybe one episode that I'm just like, yeah, that didn't work, but I've you know, I love the whole series. So, but I do understand
it's stronger at the end, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it grows up, it matures so
Sure.
much over the course of the series. But the thing is, it generally takes time to do that, no matter what.
For sure.
And so it's not as though the early episodes are poorer. The early episodes are just earlier.
Right.
You know, even with Discovery, when you jump in and production values are so high, you know, and everything's so intense and cool and it's awesome and you love it, still you can see how the series gets more seasoned and more interesting and more complex as you get through the second season.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's just the nature of serialized storytelling, I think.
Yeah.
So I've never held anything against early seasons of. Now I will hold something against late episodes of TNG like Sub Rosa and Masks, because honestly, people, we should know better by now.
Right.
It's the 7th season. I mean, but maybe you're getting tired. I understand. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I do actually have a hot take about Moist Vessel. That Moist Vessel is what Masks should have been.
Moist Vessel is what Masks should have been. Tell me that. Tell me.
Okay.
Explain that to me.
So Masks is the one where the whole Enterprise just starts transforming into something else, right? The world around them changes, the familiar thing changes, and even people are sort of put together in ways where they have to learn how to work together in new and different ways, because they're not the people that they are sort of expected to be.
Right.
And Moist Vessel was exactly that. You know, the world around them is changing and they're forced to deal with each other. People in the show are forced to deal with each other in new and different ways, and ways that they've never had to deal with each other before, and sort of confront big problems in their philosophy and personality. And I felt like the way that Moist Vessel dealt with that was way more efficient. I mean, way shorter, of course, but also way less cringy. So
well, that's good. Yeah, boy, I would never have made that connection. So this is why it's good to have somebody to talk to on this thing and not just be talking to myself all the time.
Happy to be here.
And by the way, I also want to say it just makes me feel good as a host to have a guest on who has watched my episode or listens to my episodes before, knows my work like that. That's very cool, because I've never been on anybody's show, I think, where I had listened to their previous episodes. So.
I'll keep that in mind if you're ever on one of my podcasts.
Right. You'll be like, so Kevin, what'd you think of the last episode? And I'll be like, oh man. So yeah, this episode was really good. I love that it gave it kept us guessing as to what was what and who was who and who was right and who was wrong, you know, in the situation with Boimler and Mariner and the other lady, I can't remember her name. See, I should have all these character names written down for me like a professional when I do these episodes, but
her name is Barbara Brinson. Lieutenant Brinson.
Fine, okay. Thank you. Yeah. So Barbara, right. And which I think is great that they're both like BB alliterative names.
Yep.
Brad Boimler and Barbara Brinson, as you said.
I didn't even notice until I was looking at the memory alpha page about it.
It's like Lois Lane and Lana Lang and Lex Luthor and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I just liked how that played out. I liked it because I felt like that was kind of the A story,
Uh-huh.
and well, certainly it gives the episode its title. So I liked the
Right.
way that played out, and I liked the way it kept you guessing, and it also showed how different Mariner and Barbara seemed to be at the beginning, and yet how
Uh-huh.
alike they actually were,
Mm-hmm.
and that they actually liked Brad for some of the same reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean that was really cool to see. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I liked, and I also loved seeing. I love seeing characters' love for each other.
Yeah,
That's one of my
for sure.
favorite things in just storytelling in general. And so I felt like this whole thing was about how much Mariner loves Boimler,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yep.
and also Rutherford and Tendi. Like again, and actually I have to correct something I said last episode. I kind of flipped their relationship, and I had. Tendi being the one who had gone out of her way to spend time with Rutherford, but Rutherford actually gone out of his way to spend time with Tendi. And
Mm-hmm.
or did I do that backwards?
No, no, you were right this
Okay,
time.
all right. So I think I said that backwards last episode, but
I
the
think you did
point
too.
was still the same, that one of them was really into the other, and the other one
Uh-huh.
didn't quite get it. But they have kind of moved away from that. I definitely saw that in this episode, that they're totally just like best friends and buds and everything. But
Right.
I will also say that as someone who is, this year or no, next year, married for 20 years to my best friend of the last nearly 30 years, I would say that whatever the advice that I always give people is to not look for your romantic partner,
Mm-hmm.
to not look for the one you're going to fall in love with, but just look to make deep friendships, because friendship is the foundation of a marriage. If you
Yeah, for
don't
sure.
have that, if at the end of the day you do not have a deep, long-lasting friendship, nothing else matters, because there are going to be days when the romance, there are going to be even long periods when the romance just isn't there for
Mm-hmm.
one reason or another,
Yeah.
be it physiological or emotional or stress or life or whatever. You're just not in a dating relationship for the majority of your life. For the majority of your life, you're in a what has to be a deep, abiding friendship. And I think friendship is the most important love. And so I think it's cool that we have these two in our cast of our
Mm-hmm.
main four. We have these sort of two potential couples, and they're both just kind of like best friends.
Yeah, for sure.
It's okay for them to stay there, but it's also cool if they
But
do.
if it becomes a romance, it does come out of that deep friendship, which I think is
Right.
really, like you were saying, that's really key. Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, that's the way that my wife and I are, and that's the way that I think that any really healthy relationship is where it is a friendship. And I don't know, I really liked that it even ended up in a sort of like friendly, not even friendly rivalry. Like they were actively angry at each other, but they were still friends by the end of the episode. And
Right.
I thought that was really, really helpful to show that like it doesn't have to just be like unfailingly lovey-dovey the whole time for you to still be friends with these people, And I thought that was great. It sort of kind of echoes almost the friendship between David and Jonathan in the Bible. And I know
Hmm.
that's the one that everybody goes to talk about friendship, right? But like it also, I feel like that does have a really deep meaning to it, because they are very close people. Like they
Hmm.
were very, very close friends. And I think that seeing that sort of friendship to where you would go out of your way, like Mariner went out of her way to save Boimler, even though she was wrong,
Right.
sort of went out of her way to make that happen. She jumped across empty space in a spacesuit. Like that's
That's
pretty
love.
incredible. Yeah,
That's love.
exactly,
Yeah. Well, and
exactly.
even when she's acting like at the beginning, it's like, well, she's jealous.
Sure.
She's clearly jealous, and she is. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, that's a very human thing.
Uh
But
huh.
also,
You don't jump out of an airlock because of jealousy.
exactly, she really is. She really is trying to protect him. She really
Right.
is like, if there's anything, and that was what I loved about it too. Was it's such a crisis point. It's like, if there's anything in this world that happens to somebody, it better not happen to Boimler. I'm going to stop that from happening. I'm going to do everything I can to stop that from happening. I mean, that's love.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
laying down your life for your friends. That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right.
so cool.
I also want to just toss this. I think this might be the first episode with a C story. I mean, they got rid of the
Yeah,
cold open, and then they tossed in a C story, and I
yeah,
thought that was really fun. The
yes.
the people who don't want the moon to be destroyed and they all have their various reasons.
Right.
Very classic Star Trek, like people in a conference room dealing with stuff.
Yes.
And I thought that was fantastic.
And it's great because in this series we have permission for the captain to just get totally exasperated with the whole thing.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, Freeman does stuff in there that we wish Picard would have done, but he was just too good of an ambassador to do it. And in this one, he actually does it, or she actually does it rather.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
You always wish that Picard would have just said, just blow up the moon.
Right. It's so much fun. I really enjoy that about and the other thing about the series too that I enjoy is I think probably the funniest thing to me is usually the nerd jokes.
Yes.
You know.
Oh man, I kept meaning to go back, and I didn't have time to today. I wanted to go back and freeze frame the crazy person wall that Mariner put up.
Yes.
Because I saw the salt creature.
Yes.
And I saw and I saw a couple of other things on there, and I mean they toss so many references in already that I just felt like there have got to be some great references on that wall, and I wanted to just freeze frame it and see all of them.
Yes, exactly. And then also in the dialogue when like Mariner's listing all these things that she thought Barb could have been,
right?
And she gets all the way to like what is it, like the sexy people in the skimpy jumpers who kill you for walking on the grass.
Right. Yep.
Oh, I loved it.
And honestly, it wouldn't be that crazy for them to just toss in that random species that tried to kill Wesley Crusher. You know,
right.
It would be perfectly within their sort of wheelhouse as a show to toss that in there.
Yeah, and that's the great thing, because Star Trek has always had a lot of like nerd in jokes like in there, but they're kind of subtle. It's great that this series can just hit the gas on that and just go for it. Like where else can you tell real Star Trek jokes except in the Star Trek series? So
like Boimler saying that his girlfriend is as real as a hopped up Q on Captain Picard Day. I don't even know what that means, but I love it.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I love it. I'm enjoying it more and more as time goes on. The characters are endearing themselves to me more. And it's just like any Star Trek. You know, I've talked to lots of people over the years who tried a new Star Trek series or a Star Trek movie or whatever, and they didn't like it. And I loved it. And I've always just been like, just give it a little more chance. Give it a little more time. You know, my dad tells a story that when he was growing up, well, and my grandmother told this story too when she was alive, but that when they were kids, whatever food she served, they had to try a new thing at least 3 times. And if after 3 times you didn't like it, you didn't have to eat it ever again. But you had to try it 3 times. And I've always held on to that as like, you know, give people a chance, give things a chance, you know. It's really easy at first glance to try to push anything away. Like I tried to do with Lower Decks. To push anybody or anyone away, because when they first come at you, you don't like them or you don't understand them, or maybe they didn't present their best self like Lower Decks. But give it another chance, give them another chance, and you might be surprised that
you might just discover that it's like a Kirk Sundae with Trip Tucker sprinkles.
That was the best line. That was the best line. Last episode it was the koala line. This one was the Kirk Sundae with the Trip Tucker sprinkles. Yeah, that was great. That's awesome. Yeah. So, or you might discover that they become a friend even though you were just trying to, you know, murder them because you thought they were a parasite. Whatever it is. So awesome. Well, you know, David, I've been talking to you for a while now. And you've been very gracious to just be this anonymous person this whole time that we've been talking. Although people could have taken the time while listening to us to go look you up, which they should. Tell us about Real World Theology, please. Tell us what it is and where it comes from.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the managing editor at Real World Theology, and our whole purpose is basically what your purpose is. You stated it so beautifully in episode 1 of this show, where you were talking about what you do with Gospel According to Star Trek. That's basically our purpose, but instead of limiting it to just one series or one show, we talk about it with regard to everything. It started out with movies, but we're bridging out to TV and talking about, you know, books and all video games soon, I think, as well. And so we want to talk about all of those things. You know, we think that everything that we create and enjoy says something about God and who he made us to be and how we react to that. It says something about our hearts. We think that God wrote his story on our hearts. And so when we are reading and watching good, solid narratives that really make us think and that sort of thing, it's because it's echoing or resonating in some way with the story that God put on our hearts. And so that's been something that I've been really passionate about for about a decade now. And I came on board with Real World Theology about 2 or 3 years ago, and started working with them on that as well. Well, we started working together, I guess, because I'm part of them now. But we've been doing that for a few years now. And the reason that I met you is because I reached out to you about doing this several years ago for a series called Trektember in September. We started it. I actually started it in 2016 for the 50th anniversary. We did the first season of the original series, one episode at a time. It was me, and then I had a friend sort of help me out with one of the articles, and it was a great time. Had a great experience with that. It was really well received. And then so the next year we decided we wanted to do Next Generation, and I reached out to some more people, and you were one of them. So we and I think it was really great. And ever since then we've been so the first year was original series, and then we did Next Generation. The year after that we did Discovery and the Orville. The year after that we did Deep Space Nine, and then this year is the 5th season, and we've got a little bit of a different thing this year. So
yeah, and you know what's interesting now when you talk about those earlier days of Trektember, if people go digging for those were actually on Redeeming Culture.
That's right. Yep.
Is that still a thing? Is that
it is? It's still active, though it's still online, I should say. It's not active anymore, but it's still on there. Basically, everything that I was doing on Redeeming Culture, I'm doing it on Real World Theology now. But I do have the original Trektembers linked from the page at realworldtheology.com. Okay. And actually the easiest way to get to that is if you just go to trektember.com, TREK Timber, TEMBER.com. And it'll just send you straight to the page where you can see all of the articles of Trektember that are currently out. So everything from seasons 1 through 4, and then what's out for season 5 so far.
That's fantastic. Now, the other thing that I've done with you last year was I got to write an article on an episode of Star Trek Picard, because you guys were going episode by episode through the first season of Picard and blogging about the episodes as they dropped.
Yep. Yeah, that's something that we started with Picard, and that we're going to continue through Lower Decks as well. And I think we might even do Discovery this year, just depending. I mean, it wasn't this way with Picard, but now the pandemic's happened and there's no movies coming out, so we got to do something, right? So yeah, we had a great time with Picard. I really appreciated your article and your insights on that show. And yeah, so that's not sort of officially part of Trektember, but I mean, Star Trek landscape, like we talked about earlier, the Star Trek landscape has changed significantly since we started. I mean, when I started Trektember, we didn't have any Star Trek shows on the air. Beyond had just come out. There was a little bit they had announced Discovery, but I don't even remember if there had been casting information yet. But we didn't have a whole lot going on back then, and so Trektember was an attempt to sort of fill that gap and fill the rift where there was nothing there. But now, we've got Picard and Lower Decks and Discovery, and they're working on Section 31 and Prodigy and Strange New Worlds. And I've even heard rumors of a Captain Proton revival and a 4th Kelvin universe film. Yeah. And I'm still holding out hope for a show about Seven of Nine as a Fenris Ranger. And, right. And I want to see a show about her and being pursued by Admiral Janeway, but she's secretly helping her. I feel like that would be a great dynamic and a really fun show. I want to keep saying it just to sort of speak that into the world, and hopefully it'll happen. Maybe somebody from CBS is listening. Give Jerry Ryan a show about her time as Seven's time as a Fenris Ranger. I think that would be great.
All right. So David, are you coming on a Gospel According to Star Trek podcast and plugging The Secret?
Not on purpose. Hey, stranger things have happened. People had
Hey, yeah, I agree.
clamored for a Pike show with Anson Mount, and it's happening now.
Oh, I know.
So,
It's great. I'm so excited about it.
mhm.
That's
They're releasing the Snyder cut of the Justice League. I mean, come on. There's going to be no living with nerds after this. I'm just trying to ride that wave.
Oh man, I was with you right up to the Snyder cut part, but that's okay. That's fine.
Hey, I'm not passing judgment on the quality of it or anything like that. I'm just saying they clamored for it and they
and
did
they
it.
got it.
And
That's true.
so,
There you
like,
go.
that's,
That's there you go. I see what you're saying. I understand.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's the great thing about being a Star Trek fan right now.
Hmm.
Your voice is heard more than it used to be.
Yeah, for sure.
And we were talking, I think, last episode about how there's all this kind of behind the scenes chaos that everybody's talking about and getting all worried about and kind of wringing their hands about
Hmm.
in certain corners of the world. But that's the kind of stuff that has always gone on behind the scenes. It's just that
Right,
we didn't get to peek behind the curtain back then.
right.
We're just more aware of what's going on in production than we used to be. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but people have to not get distracted by it. And
Right.
but it also can involve fans more in the creation of a property like Star Trek.
Hmm.
um, we can see fan influence from season 1 to season 2 of Discovery, though I think a certain amount of that was already planned.
Yeah.
A certain amount of it also was kind of a response to fan reactions to the first season, which I loved, but still. um, um, but you see that conversation happening in real time. So it pays right now, I think, to not walk away, to
Yeah.
not turn the TV off because you don't like what you see, but to stay
Hmm.
engaged and to use your voice and to talk about
Right.
it and to see what other people are saying.
I mean, back in 1967 or 68, I don't remember, it took Bijo Trimble, like, it was her full-time job trying to get people to write in to save Star Trek so that it would have a
Right.
third season.
That's right.
And that is so much easier now. There's so much less in the way of you making your voice heard to CBS right now.
Right.
And I hope that that's the sort of thing that Trek fans really take to heart, that, like, we have a voice here, and there's just so much going on, and it's such a profitable thing, and there's so much that they're willing to do. I mean, they're making a Nickelodeon show, for crying out loud. Like, that's way
Right.
out of the box.
Right.
I feel like they're willing to try just about anything. And so,
Mhm.
toss out the good ideas and maybe it'll get picked up.
Yeah, that's good. So Admiral Janeway chasing after Annika.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good.
I think it'd be
So
great.
yeah, so you guys, so the lower decks thing is kind of dovetailing with Trektember, right?
Yeah. So I'm sort of including it just because it's so much Trek content, right? And
Mhm.
but this year, so in years past, we've been doing episodes every day or at least every weekday, especially the first two. Or the first season, we were talking about every episode of a season, and then
Oh,
when we were talking about Discovery and the Orville, Discovery's first season, we were talking about every episode of that as well. This year, I wanted to take a step back because we were, back then we were publishing shorter articles, we were publishing every day. I wanted to take a step back because it is such a different landscape right now, and Star Trek is so much broader, and sort of the future is the horizon is so much broader than we had even just last year, but definitely 4 years ago. So this year, instead of focusing on one show or one season of a show, we wanted to go through go more broad with it, just like the show, this franchise as a whole is going. So we are still doing episodic reviews, like you mentioned, of Lower Decks, but for our Trektember sort of regulation Trektember episodes, we're going to be going into a greater depth and breadth about the Star Trek universe, and we've chosen a theme, which is
right.
new life, new civilizations. That's famously a part of the 37 eternal words, which explain the premise of Star Trek in every episode of the original series and also every episode of Next Generation. And let's see, I think it was the final episode of Enterprise, and it's probably been said one or two other times. Star Trek 2009 is the oath of the Starfleet captain. And yeah, it's all over the place in Star Trek, right? But we wanted to focus on new life and new civilizations because there's a lot of meaning in those words, right? The
Yeah.
new life meaning what Christ purchased for us on the cross, the new civilization being the coming kingdom of God, the kingdom of God that is here, that we're a part of already, and just the way that those both are echoed in Star Trek, the way that those are both portrayed in Star Trek. I think it's a really fascinating thing that the famous atheist Gene Roddenberry gave us what is probably the most beautiful portrayal of a possible heaven that I've ever seen. His future 24th century Federation is the closest thing to a heaven location that we sort of have in mainstream popular culture. There's no want, there's no hunger, there's no need. Everybody is cared for, and everybody is valued as a human or non-human, whatever the case may be.
Right.
Everyone has got a purpose. People on Starfleet ships have a purpose. They have a thing to explore. And I've said for a couple of years now, I don't think heaven is going to be like Harps in the Clouds, like the Looney Tunes cartoons show. I think it'll be more like Star Trek, where we're together as a people and we're exploring the depths of God and who he is and what he does. And I don't know that that's going to take place on a starship.
Right.
Just to be clear, I don't think we're going to be shooting phasers at Romulans or anything like that, but I do think that there's going to be a distinct amount of exploration, and we're going to be finding out more of who God is. And I think that's what Star Trek is doing. They're finding ways to explore God through that. And so I think that's part of what the new life and new civilization really means. It's more about exploring God and less about trying to just find new ways to entertain or amuse yourself or pass the time for all of eternity. It's about being a part of a new life, a new civilization in your new life. And I that's all just sort of part and parcel with what we're trying to do this year. So the first article went up by the time this comes out last Thursday, and it was an article by your friend and mine, Mike Poteet, and he was talking about holy books within Star Trek, the original series. And I thought it was just a fantastic article. It was talking about For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, and the Omega Glory, and A Piece of the Action. And they're sort of holy books, the way that they have changed their civilizations, the way that the new life, how Kirk brought new life into all of those things, and how the new civilizations of those three worlds were affected and shaped by the book. And he did a really great job. And I really encourage everyone to go to Trektember.com, take a look at that. It's a fantastic article, and I definitely recommend it.
Well, and I recommend anything Mike writes, and especially things like that, which the moment I hear it, I think, why didn't I think to write that? It's so good.
It is. It's fantastic.
Such a great, such a great angle, and Mike is just he's a good friend and has been involved with the whole Gospel According to Star Trek thing behind the scenes, helping me out over the years, and yeah, great writer. And you've got a lot of really good writers contributing to Trektember, and I just enjoy the whole exploration, and I love that you're taking it in new directions, doing new things with it, and I think it's great to be flexible with your model, and that you're going into some longer pieces, especially as someone who tends to write longer pieces.
I'm not going to lie. That was a not insignificant part of my decision, that I kept getting such great articles, and I'm like, sorry, Kevin, it's just too long.
Oh, shucks, sir. I'm just glad I got you on record saying that. That's all I can say about that.
Oh, man, I said too much. Oh,
no. Yeah, and I tell you what, I do plug that article on the Nepenthe and some other things that I've written for you here and there, because
fantastic.
Because what I really appreciate about stuff like you're doing is it gives me a chance to write, with a prompt that I never otherwise would have had. And I sometimes stumble upon things, and it draws things out of me that I never would have otherwise discovered. So anytime I get a chance to write for something like that, I always try to make it happen. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I mean, you're mostly, it seems like, writing longer form stuff in the form of books and longer talks. And I think what we're trying to do through Trektember is just give people a little bit of a bite. This is a little bit of a thing. You're just like, you're watching one episode. Here's a little bit of a, maybe meditation is too Christian-y of a word for this, but here's a little bit of a meditation on this episode, just so that you're not, our tagline on Real World Theology is entertainment is not mindless. Yeah. So engage your mind with this episode, or in this case of Mike's article, 3 episodes of Star Trek. Engage your mind. What does this say about God and how he's made us and who he's made us to be, how he's made us to react to texts. And I think that that's really helpful. And, real world theology isn't just Trektember. There's more than that. If you like this model and you really think that these are valuable ways of interacting with culture, I mean, I will grant you almost all of the episodes or articles on our front page are Star Trek right now, but there is an article on Mad Max Fury Road on the front page.
Awesome.
So there's more stuff than just that, and we think that this is a really valuable way of talking about the world and our place in it, because there is so much of what we ourselves are imbued within the culture that we create and the stories that we tell.
That's awesome, sir. Man, it's great to see you guys out there doing this. And not just for Trektember, but for all of what you're doing at Real World Theology, because like Tim and I have talked about more than once, it's never a forced conversation. It's never an attempt to fit something that you're watching or something that you're listening to into some kind of shell, into some kind of mold that it doesn't jive with. You're just, as a Christian with your Christian worldview lenses on, responding honestly to what you see and how it connects with the things that matter to you most.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
and doing that in an honest way. And that's why it's great that we can, we can have those deeper, richer conversations in the context of general nerdy conversations, which is what we, the kind of angle that we take over here. But I feel a lot of kinship with what you guys are doing, both on Real World Theology in general and in Trektember. Not only because I'm the guy who started a thing called Spocktober, which I ran for several years, but
man, that's a good name too. We really value what you're doing at Gospel According to Star Trek too, and I really value the thought and the depth that you bring to this endeavor. And hey, the more people that are doing this with culture, I think the more that we can sort of normalize that way of looking at our stories, I think the better. I think it just makes us a stronger people and more engaged with who God is.
I agree. And even if you're not a Christian, or even if you're not a nerd, I think it's great from either angle to engage with this stuff, because number one, if you are a Christian, it helps you, no matter who you are. I think it can help you think more deeply about what you engage with in your life and what you love and why you love it.
For sure.
And then also, I think when we're doing that through the arts and through media and pop culture, that's always a doorway into how we deal with other human beings. And that's what Star Trek, has always been about transforming the way that we deal with one another as human beings by telling good stories that model those things for us, and in ways that come at us that we might not expect. And so I think that's great. So as we're about to come to the end of the show here, and I like to do a little Q&A section at the end of the episode as often as we can get it in. And you actually have a Q for me to A. So I would love to hear your Q, not a petty godlike being, but an actual question. I would love to hear.
Well, the answer might actually be Q. Okay, so here's the question. At the end of Discovery Season 2, they go 700 years in the future. So presumably at least part of Discovery Season 3 is going to be set very far distant future from everything we've seen before. The question is, what very long-lived character from past Star Trek episodes would you like to see showing up in Discovery Season 3?
I'm trying to think of a character that actually lives that long. I mean, Q would be a good answer. Q would be an excellent answer. But I don't know that Q fits tonally in Discovery at all.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to see people reacting to Q, because it literally would be like, hey, you really don't belong here. Like, this isn't how we do things, dude. We don't do tongue-in-cheek humor. Like, it's so funny because we talked about the term tongue-in-cheek on the last episode, but like, we don't do that. Like, you need to get on with yourself. So that would be interesting. I'm trying to think of any other characters like that are really long-lived.
We were just talking about one of the new cast members is going to be a Trill,
right?
And
so
I believe Dax is long-lived. Yes.
Yeah. So could it possibly be Gray Dax?
Ooh.
You know that, but now that we think about it, and I'm thinking about long-lived characters,
Uh-huh.
you know who I've always wanted to go back to visit, and who I was really disappointed that we didn't go back to visit. Kai Opaka.
Ooh, I like that.
Because Kai
Yeah.
Opaka from Deep Space Nine, spoiler
Uh-huh.
alert, Kai Opaka is stranded on that planet where nobody dies.
Right. Yep. Yep. She'd definitely still be alive,
And
assuming that planet's still there.
right, and her mission is to like save that culture.
Uh-huh.
So in 700 years, what progress has she made?
Oh man. She's taking over the Gamma Quadrant, right?
Right. But
It's
I think that would be I would think that would be fascinating and fantastic.
yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about her. I would love to see. So that when 700 years was first sort of thrown out, some people online did the math and figured out that this lines up. Season 3 of Discovery presumably lines up almost perfectly with the timeline of Living Witness, the episode from Voyager, where the Doctor's backup emitter or backup program, backup unit module, whatever, is left on a planet in the Delta Quadrant. And he sort of enjoys he corrects the misconceptions that the people of this planet have about Voyager. They think it's the warship Voyager.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he corrects their sort of flawed interpretation of everything and participates in this revolution. And eventually it says he decides that he wants to go home. And so he loads up a ship and heads home at the very end of the episode. Or they talk about him having headed home, rather. Right. And somebody did the math and figured out that that's basically about 700 years from, air quotes now, but when Discovery leaves their timeline. And right. Given the vagaries and the sort of abouts that are involved in the timeline here, it is very possible that you could see Voyager's Doctor showing up, coming back to the Federation in season 3 of Discovery. And I think that would be fantastic. I'd love to see Bob Picardo back on screen. Somebody else. I don't want to recast. I want to see Robert Picardo. You can talk about how he modified his program to make it look like he aged or something like that, because I want to definitely see him back.
Yeah, I mean, recasting Bob Picardo is as impossible as recasting Brent Spiner. I mean, you just don't do it. You just don't do it.
Right, for sure.
You don't care that they've gotten older. And really, honestly, Bob has always looked a little older than he actually was. So, hey, you know.
Right. Yeah. Much like Patrick Stewart, he is only now caught up with the age that he's always looked.
Something like that. Oh, man. Well, that's great. No, I think that's great. That's the first question we've gotten that wasn't directly rooted in some conversation between Star Trek and Christianity. So, thanks for that, I guess.
Well, I felt like we had a lot of Jesuses in the previous conversation.
We did. So. Oh boy, that's great. Well, no, I appreciate you doing that. And that's exciting, and I'm excited about the future of Star Trek. I'm excited about Trektember. I'm excited to be involved with it. When my post comes out, I'm sure everybody's going to hear about it on the podcast, because
you're the king of shameless plugs.
I am. You know what? I appreciate that. I work on that. So, David, thank you so much for being here. I've appreciated your presence greatly.
Thank you for having me.
And next week, we're going to cover episode 6 of Lower Decks, and we'll be returning to our discussion of Star Trek Discovery, and I hope you'll join us. In the meantime, please like, share, comment, rate, and subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to ring that bell. And also send us your questions, like David just did. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter and Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to discuss your question on the show. So that's going to wrap it for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. My thanks again to our guest, David Atwell. The website is Trektember.com or realworldtheology.com. Links are in the description. Please go check that out. And my thanks to you. Yes, you. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, I'm Kevin C. Neese. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. And Tim, I'll see you next time.